Hello, and welcome to this video. So, I wanted to finally film something talking about some of my favorite books, because all I usually do is talk about what I've just read, and that doesn't give like a good concept background of the kind of things I'm into, I guess. But to make this difficult for myself, talking about favorite sci-fi only, first of all. I'm talking about it by decade. I'm picking 5 books per decade that are my favorites of that decade. And I'm telling myself no repeat authors within a decade, which is why there's less Asimov on here than there otherwise would be. We're doing the 1950s through the 1990s, because those are the decades where I have enough to choose from that I've read and really liked. But also you avoid the issue of the 21st century where I have read more and it's just like there's an overabundance and it gets more difficult to pick, and then also like there's more series and it's more like, don't want to get into it. So we're stopping with the 90s. Also, this video does not need to be like 5 hours long. And I own some of these books, so I'll be like showing those, I guess, but a lot of them I don't own. I don't know. I want to say it's like mostly don't own, but there's still quite a few over here. Because, you know, we are talking about, what, 25 books, I guess? Yeah, math? Okay. So why don't we start with the 1950s. The 1950s were definitely an interesting time in science fiction. I think every decade is an interesting time in science fiction, but something that I noticed in a fair number of books from the 50s was like a post-apocalyptic type theme. Nuclear holocaust just destroyed the earth as we know it, etc. kind of thing. And also, even if that's not what the book is about, a consideration that is a possibility. Okay, let's start with A Canticle for Leibovitz by Walter M. Miller Jr. This one I read for a book club years ago, and also, okay, you're gonna notice a theme here with some of these books where I don't remember what they're about super well because I read them like 10 years ago. Canticle for Leibovitz is a post-apocalyptic type book. Let's see, let's look it up. Thank you. And it is about, well, some sort of nuclear annihilation has taken place, and this is set several centuries later. Civilization should kind of struggle to rebuild itself in some way, and people in general really distrust and dislike science. They want nothing to do with it, but despite the fact that much of civilization has been destroyed, the Catholics are still there. Nothing will get to them. And they are in their monasteries preserving scientific thought and information, much like they did in the Dark Ages, for a future when humanity will stop being so afraid of it and like we can do science again. The actual plot of this book I don't remember super well. There is a specific monastery that it's about, and their deal is that they want to canonize this guy, Leibovitz, who was some sort of engineer, who I guess took notes or kept information, or maybe even just wrote some sort of textbook that they're all really kind of obsessed with. Yeah, so they want to make him a saint, and they keep like, I don't know, mailing the Pope about it or something. Let's fucking see. It's set in the desert of the southwestern United States. Yeah, so, I mean, I don't think they're ever really clear where it's set specifically, but it is set in a desert in the US somewhere. Yeah, so they're keeping scientific information for the future when they want to use it again. Oh, interesting, okay. Like, I literally didn't know any of this. I'm learning things. We're learning together. There's a sequel that I'm not gonna read, okay. The novel is a fix-up of 3 short stories Miller published in the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction that were inspired by the author's participation in the bombing of a monastery at the Battle of Monte Cassino during World War II. I guess the monastery itself must have inspired him. Yeah, it is a fantastic book, frankly. Like, it talks a lot about religion and philosophy, which is something a lot of sci-fi books don't do, but the few that do are, I think it's a terribly interesting thing. And why does it have a sequel? Oh my god, why? The sequel is called Saint Leibovitz and the Wild Horsewoman. I have never wanted to read a book less. But there is a pretty big, like, time gap at one point in the book, maybe at multiple points. And you kind of find out by the end of the book that in the future, the further future, the science that these monks have preserved actually does get used. I'm pretty sure it ends with some people like building a rocket to escape Earth. Oh, interesting. I need to read this book again though, because like I don't remember stuff. This is interesting. Okay. They're actually like in Utah, it says. He was betrayed and martyred. Later he was beatified. Don't know what that means. Oh, the 3 parts have Latin names. Okay, anyway. There is, it's a great book. I read it for a book club. You know, honestly, like book clubs are just, I think, a great place to just find out about science fiction books I'd never heard of because I really didn't know that much about the genre, and I still don't, frankly. I'm always learning things. But yeah, it's a great book. Let us talk about something else. Let's talk about another one I frankly don't remember that much about, but I do own. Okay. The Big Time by Fritz Leiber. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Leiber for pronunciation there. This is, okay. So I have this American science fiction, Library of America published this like 2-volume set of 9 classic novels from the 1950s, published by Americans, I guess. And my favorite of the batch was The Big Time by Fritz Leiber. And this is just like, these are obviously not very long books because this is 1 volume of a 2-volume set and there are 5 books in this. So The Big Time, here's what I remember. I remember that it was just a load of fun. The voice of the main narrator is this, she's this woman who like works at a bar of some sort, and there is a time war or something, and she's fun. I enjoy. I need to reread everything. How about that? Enter 3 Visage. Listen, I feel like this book doesn't get enough credit, okay? Because like I looked it up on Goodreads at one point. It did not have a lot of stars. I was like, hello, this was fun. This was a good book. I'm gonna look it up on here and we're gonna find out some fun facts about it, like the plot. Oh boy, here we go. Literature, yeah. It's a short novel. Oh my god, look at this cover. Oh my god, look at this cover. Can you see that? Fuck, stop looking at me. I hope it's focusing. I'm obsessed. All right. I'm sorry. Plot. Capable of time travel. The narrator is Greta, a young human female employed at a recuperation station where soldiers recover from battles. She's an entertainer, part prostitute, part nurse, and part psychotherapist. I don't know why I thought this was set at a bar. But okay, it's set at a place that's like a crossroads between these, I don't know, these different factions. And like the idea is that there's this time war and people who are from all these different periods like are coming to this place. I don't know, it was a lot of fun. There was a lot going on, and just like there were aliens, there were people from different periods of time in the past of Earth, and like it's a lot of fun. Literally, I'm reading this like, what the fuck? I don't remember any of this, I'm sorry, but I really liked this book. I promise some of these reviews will not suck. Let's talk about The Naked Sun by Isaac Asimov. Okay, This one I actually remember. So The Naked Sun is the second of his like robot detective novel books, and it is great. I think all three, no, at least the first two were definitely published in the 50s, so I did have to choose between them. And The Naked Time won out just because the setting is so cool. So the premise of the series, though, is that there's this, like, it's the future, blah, blah, blah. And humans live in these big dome cities on Earth, and they also live on a number of colony worlds, and they kind of don't get along very well. The people from the colony worlds are just kind of like, the people from Earth are dirty and they're gross and they suck. And also the people from Earth really hate robots and don't want anything to do with them. But the people of the colony worlds really like robots. You know, mostly because they're useful to them, of course. Okay, so there's this detective from Earth named Elijah Bailey, and he really doesn't like robots, but when a robot appears to have committed murder of a ambassador, I think, of some sort from space, he has to kind of go to the spacers like outpost on Earth, and he has to interact with this robot detective, and he doesn't like it. That's the first book, though. The second book, he actually has to leave Earth and go to another, a colony world where he is investigating what appears to be robots having murdered this guy, and it's like very strange because they should not be able to do that. I liked it a lot because just the culture that we explored on that other world is very interesting. It was very, very different to how things were on Earth, and so there was just an interesting culture clash of like showing how Lige was like dealing with living on another world temporarily, and kind of the clash between how so many of the things that they do like very much hit against things that made him uncomfortable. I really like the detail of how, having always lived in dome cities on Earth and always being inside, Lige just like almost panics at the idea of actually being out underneath, as the book puts it, the naked sun. Like he's out there, and there's only the sky between him and space, and he's like freaked out by that, but he has to get used to it in order to actually investigate what's going on. I think it was the best of the trilogy. And also I like the relationship between Lige and R. Daniel Olivow, who is the robot he's been working with, who is a robot detective basically, or the closest thing they have to a detective, because it's an interesting take on robots. Asimov sometimes is like, this robot is just a machine, and sometimes he's like, these robots are almost people, and this is a case where it's sort of in between, so it really depends what you're reading by him, but yeah. It's interesting to watch like Lige like evolve over the course of the trilogy, and his opinions on robots and on like life itself and whatnot. Yeah, let's talk about The Demolished Man by Alfred Bester. I'm sorry, like all these fucking books about dudes. I'm sorry. We'll move on from the men at some point, but not in the 1950s. The Demolished Man by Alfred Bester, which like I read much more recently, so we can talk. It is the first Hugo winner. Congratulations, Mr. Bester. Mr. Bester. And it is about a world in which many people are telepaths. So like a large part of the reason I was interested to read this book was because I know that on Babylon 5, J. Michael Straczynski based some of the way that the telepaths work and are structured on Bester's books, and then named a character Alfred Bester, like, just for fun. So let me tell you, it was weird encountering that name as a fictional telepath who is basically a villain from that TV show, and then discovering later that is also a science fiction author that people have heard of. Anyway, so in this book, the thing is that because there are telepaths, and because a lot of cops are telepaths, but a lot of people are telepaths, it's basically impossible to commit premeditated murder, because somebody will like hear you thinking about it and stop you. And so in the book, a character really wants to commit some premeditated murder. Now, I thought more of the book was going to be about like the lead up to this, but actually it's not. Like, he commits the murder really early on, and then we're following the detective who's attempting to prove that he did it. He knows he did it because he fucking read his mind, but he needs actual physical proof because like what he's heard in his thoughts and whatnot is not admissible in court. And so it's this back and forth where he's, you know, trying to catch him at something and trying to prove that he was the one who killed this man. And it's a lot of fun. And I enjoyed some of the stuff, especially with how the telepaths how they communicate with each other, because they'll have these whole like conversations in their own heads, and the way that it's printed on the page looks really interesting because they'll like almost create art with it in a very specific way that doesn't exist in the real world, so that the way that the words are on the page and overlapping and like twisting around. He only does it a couple of times. Like, the book is generally not told like that, but it's just kind of a cool little thing that's in there. And it's a good book. It was a good murder mystery, honestly, and it had some weird shit in it, but like, it's the 1950s, of course it did. Sci-fi, I feel like you just have to go into it knowing there's gonna be some weird shit, right? The Martian Chronicles, okay? Let's finish the 50s, dear God. The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. Here is this completely blank cover. There you go. I bought this used, and it's possible this used to actually have a cover that did not come with the book. I don't know. When did I buy this? I might have bought this at a library book sale, actually. And I'm willing to bet that at some point it had an interesting cover, but it does not anymore. This book is interesting. So, Ray Bradbury, well, he wrote like a lot of stuff, but he wrote a lot of short stories that are published in various collections, and this is kind of similar to that, but I believe that these stories were all really intended to be read in this volume. It's a set of chronicles, yes. Some of them are short stories, some of them are genuinely just like a paragraph. Let's see if I can find one of those. Yeah, here's one. February 2033, The Locusts is one page. And then we move on to August 2033. And what this is essentially about is humans coming to Mars. Gradually over time. So you have some initial people coming to Mars just for the first time. You have initial settlers. You have a couple of just stories about like the beings living on Mars and how humans coming affects them. And then there's the ending, which if you're familiar, you know, if you know, you know, is a pretty great ending. And yeah, like it's kind of a bit of a kick in the teeth. And I would say this is one of my favorite things I've read by Bradbury, because it, you know, it really takes that short story kind of like collection thing, but they're all actually connected and are meant to be read in this particular order, rather than, oh, they're just all stories that are being told because they relate to tattoos on this guy. I don't know. Like, that one was fine, but this was quite good, and the ending was good. And my battery's dying, so we're gonna do something about that, and be back in a sec to talk about the 1960s. All right, I'm back, and hopefully it'll stay charged now. It's time to talk about the 1960s. This is officially taking way too long. Okay, the 1960s. So let's just dive straight into it. The first book I have to talk about is The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert A. Heinlein. So Heinlein is an interesting author. The Moon is a Harsh Mistress is definitely my favorite of his books that I've read, because just the setting is so interesting, the world building is so interesting. It's about a man who lives on the moon. Basically, the moon has this mining colony. They mine, I kind of forget what exactly, on the moon, and send it to Earth. And they're not independent, but they do want to be, because they have kind of their own way of doing things, which is very like almost anarchist. Heinlein had some weird ideas about how the world should be run. I think it was kind of a libertarian which, you know, is great. It's a great philosophy, but like Minnie, it only really works until you run up against people, you know? But anyway, we're not here to talk about that. It's a really interesting, like a worldview to write a book from, though. So like the way that they run their society on the moon is very like, I don't think they really have a government, but they have kind of the ways that they do things that work out for them, whatever. And it's about this guy who lives on the moon, and there's like a supercomputer on the moon that he like works with, and it's super intelligent or something, and it like figures out how to get the people on the moon have their own independent colony. And so there's like all this stuff they have to try and do, and I enjoyed it a lot, honestly. Like it's got, well, of course I did, that's why it's on this list, but it's got just like Heinlein's favorite weird horny thing that he does is he likes to have somehow construct a system of plural marriage that is still heterosexual. It's like, it's weird, I don't know. But this guy okay, this is the most interesting one that I think he came up with, at least in what I read, because in this book, basically you marry one person, but you're basically marrying onto the end of a chain of people. So he ends up marrying this woman that he meets, and she is married to some other guy who is married to some other woman, like so down the line. And they're basically just this one big family that live together, and kind of like the beginnings of that family are quite elderly, and you know, they just kind of collectively look after all the kids, and like it's really an interesting system. And it was a kind of a great book. Also, I remember that he had lost an arm, and so he had like a prosthetic arm, but the cool thing about his prosthetic arm was that he could like change the hand kind of situation into different tools for his job and stuff. So, okay. Dune. I bought a copy this last weekend. I want to show it off because it's so pretty. And it makes me think of Lawrence of Arabia, which is one of my favorite movies. But look at this. Sand dunes, little man in white. Dune. Okay, we need to talk about Dune. It's been eons since I've read this, but yeah, this is an excellent book. Very like focused on political situation between these different families that have incredible amounts of power in space. Like essentially there's a space empire, and there's a planet called Arrakis or Dune, and that's where the spice comes from, and the spice is necessary for like the particular kind of space travel that they do. And whoever controls Arrakis therefore controls the spice trade, therefore riches and power. And it is sort of given to this Duke Atreides and his family, and so his son Paul is the main character, and his not wife, she's not his wife, concubine or something. Anyway, Paul's mother, Jessica, and the two of them, you know, essentially like, there's this other family, the Harkonnens, who really want to take over Arrakis, and it's this big like fight between them, and after they attack, Paul and Jessica have to escape into the desert, and then it turns into this whole thing where he kind of becomes Paul has this like this destiny, and he becomes like this savior figure out of prophecy for these people, and also there's some magic. It's great, like whatever, it's great and very pretty. The Left Hand of, oh my god, what came out of my mouth? The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. I also own this one. I think this copy is hideous, but whatever. I bought it used, so who gives a shit, right? The price was right. I actually reread this book last year because that's how much I love it. I needed to read it again. And it is just an absolutely beautiful book. Like basically it's about a man in the future is sent to the planet of winter, or Geth or something. I forget exactly what the planet is called in their language, but I'm going to call it winter because that's what it says in the back. And he is sent there to communicate with the leaders of the of the people. There are multiple countries on the planet, which is kind of an odd thing because he's like, normally we would be communicating with planets that have a unified government. But anyway, he's supposed to be kind of like communicating with these leaders on this planet to tell them there's people out in space and we're interested in giving you technology, interacting with you, etc. if you want to join our big fucking space federation thing. And this guy is sent, you know, so he's sent and he encounters the world as it is, and it's kind of a strange setup of that he doesn't really like understand how some of the things in the world works. Basically like the way that they conceptualize gender is really interesting and very different from how he does. So he's just kind of like, this is weird. And you kind of get to follow his journey of understanding, especially between him and this major other character who is from this planet who is helping him. And there's also a section of the book that's just a lot of traveling across this ice sheet that's at the north part of the world, because he's trying to get from one country to another, and they're like exiled and stuff, and this is like the best way to do it, but it's very dangerous and it's this long journey, and it's so good. All right. Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut. This is one I don't remember a lot about. All right. I feel like I'm a terrible reader of Vonnegut because I've read all of like 3 of his books, and it's been years and years since I've read one, and I'm stupid. But anyway, Cat's Cradle is about the end of the world, but it's kind of a stupid end of the world. Basically, a scientist discovers an isomer of water that, if it comes into contact with normal ass water, will change the normal water to the isomer, and then it freezes at basic room temperature. So you can imagine that that would cause the apocalypse, essentially, right? Because if eventually all water on Earth froze at 27 degrees Celsius or whatever the hell room temperature is, we'd be really fucked, right? Like, we'd be incredibly fucked. Obviously, like, that's insane and not how water works, but like, what if it was? And I don't remember the plot. I just remember that that's like the premise, and this character is kind of like trying to figure out something to do about it, kind of ish, and the world ends, basically. Like, spoilers, but they don't fix it. So, you know, Kurt Vonnegut's always a trip. Okay, The Man in the High Castle. So anyways, by Philip K. Dick. This is another book that I read because of this book club I was in. Actually, I first read Left Hand of Darkness because of that book club too. But The Man in the High Castle, the first Dick book on this list. Wait, no, it's not the only one. Okay, but it's the one representing the 60s. Man in the High Castle is an alternate history. Essentially, what if England, France, the US, etc. had not won World War II? What if the Nazis and Imperial Japan had won? And this is set in like the 1960s, so some time has passed since the end of the war, and it's set in the United States, or what used to be the United States. I think it's set in California, like the West Coast, kind of to the Rockies, now belongs to Japan, and it's kind of different as a result. And you know, I don't remember the plot of this book either, because that's clearly the first thing that I forget about books. But there is a whole bunch of stuff involving the I Ching. There's stuff involving essentially like, what if things had gone differently and we were living in like reality where, what if like the Nazis hadn't won? Wouldn't that be interesting? Like, somebody wrote a book in the book where the Nazis and Imperial Japan lost. So I always just thought that was a really interesting concept. Like, they had an alternate history book. Let's see what it says on Wikipedia. Ooh, this cover is a lot. Oh, and that the novel within novel is called The Grasshopper Lies Heavy. Yeah, so they've basically like split up the United States in the way that they're ruling it, but I kind of remember Colorado for some reason was like its own thing. Synopsis. Good Lord. Oh, right. So the reason this all started going different is because this guy assassinated President-elect FDR. And this resulted in the continuation of the Great Depression, the US policy of non-intervention, and then Nazi Germany was therefore able to conquer and annex continental Europe and the Soviet Union into the Greater Germanic Reich. And then this like increased, you know, et cetera, and so that's why they won the war. Which is an interesting take. I'm like thinking like, would that have happened if the US hadn't gotten involved? I don't know. Obviously we have no way of knowing. Because I don't want to be one of those annoying Americans who's just like, the US changed everything. But also from some of the books I've read, it was kind of a big deal that the US got involved. So I don't know. But then again, like, you know, Hitler was like, let's attack Russia at the same time, and that was very stupid, so maybe they still wouldn't have won. So there's a geopolitical Cold War going on between Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany now over the former US. Okay, well this is not the plot, this is just the world building. Hitler's got syphilis. We love it. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah. They drain the Mediterranean, which is something the Nazis were thinking about. Like, oh, maybe we'll do that, which is like the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard. Plot. Set in San Francisco. It sucks. I'm not being very helpful. Okay, so there's this guy, okay. There's a businessman who owns an antique shop that specializes in Americana for Japanese clientele who fetishize cultural artifacts of the former US. One day he receives a request from a high-ranking trade official who is looking for a particular gift. He gets a whole bunch of counterfeit stuff. Then there's this other guy. Okay, you know what? Whatever. It's wild, and you should read it. Oh, look at this map. I didn't think the Rocky Mountain states, which is the green part, I mean, that's like most of the country. So I guess like a lot of the country is still like not taken over. Interesting. Okay. Whatever. It's a great book. It's a great book. I guess they made a TV show out of it like not that long ago, which I have not watched, so I can't talk about, so I didn't bring it up. Let's, yeah, it's a good book. So let's talk about the 1970s. Okay, this one I've actually got 4 of the 5 books from this decade in my personal possession. Wait, why? Hang on. Hang on. Hang on, I've discovered an issue. For some reason I wrote this one book down as being from the 70s, and it's absolutely not. So that's weird. This technically is. Okay, well we're gonna talk about it anyway, awkwardly. We'll do that last. Okay, because I don't have time to come up with a whole different like list. Okay, so the 70s. We're gonna start with Isaac Asimov, again, my man, The Gods Themselves. So this book I have not read in a really long time. Are you sensing a pattern? And but I do mostly remember the plot. So it's divided into 3 parts. And in the first part, a scientist kind of semi-accidentally builds a perpetual motion machine. And a perpetual motion machine, which I believe that's the right term, is a theoretical, well, it's entirely theoretical, it's impossible, right? The idea being that, say, it were a pendulum, and whenever if you push a pendulum, it will eventually stop swinging because of friction. But in this theory, the pendulum would swing forever. And that would basically be able to like power, you know, machines to make electricity or whatever you want to do. So this guy makes something like that and is like, oh shit, this is actually working. And so they start building copies of it to like, wow, we fixed, you know, all of our problems with running out of oil or whatever, like we can run Earth on this stuff. But obviously it's not that simple because these things are impossible. So, you know, it must be getting its energy from somewhere. In the second part, we're hanging out in another world with some little aliens. They're really fun little aliens. They're like these little bags of goo. Loved them. But something's going wrong. Something's weird, something's happening. And then the third part, we're back in future Earth with these machines, and they're building more of them, and they're like building a really big one on the moon or whatever. But then someone starts figuring out where that energy might be coming from, and like how this is inevitably going to like destroy the universe or something. Anyway, whatever, it's great. The Dispossessed by my lady Ursula K. Le Guin. First of all, just feast your eyes on this cover. This is like my favorite cover of any book that I own. It is so pretty. Now, like, even, how do I describe this book? Because I love this book, of course. It's one of my favorites, but again, I maybe don't remember the plot super well, and I haven't reread it yet recently. Do really want to. So let's just look at the back. Okay, so it's about a physicist who attempts to reunite two planets cut off from each other by centuries of distrust. So the bit that I remember is that this physicist is from a moon with an anarchic utopian civilization. And the people there originally came from the planet, and that planet at this time similar to Earth, or really to the United States in a lot of ways, with rampant capitalism, great poverty, immense wealth, warring nations. And basically there was this philosopher who had this like, let's have an anarchic utopia type philosophy. She got thrown in jail and stuff, but based on her writings, some people moved to the moon and built that society. And it's very interesting because they've been cut off for so long, but there's an exchange between the scientists. And so he comes down to the planet, and it's a really interesting study in these two different ways of life and how they affect this one particular character. And I especially saw the stuff in their society on the moon, which is fascinating because it's so different from the way that we run our country and our lives. And the ways in which it was like better and also worse were just very interesting to explore. Beautiful book, want to read it again. Then we have A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. I mean, choosing this single book feels a little bit cheap just because, like, well, okay, it doesn't always work perfectly as a single novel because I think it was originally a radio drama anyway, and then the second book, Restaurants at the End of the Universe, if you combine those two, they basically make up a normal kind of plotted book, like with an actual, this doesn't have a real ending, it just sort of stops, but only one book, so this is the one I went with. It's bonkers, like, it's very funny, it's a satire. The character of Arthur Dent is mad because somebody is going to bulldoze his house to make way for a freeway, and he's trying to stop them, but then it turns out that some aliens are going to destroy Earth to make way for an interplanetary freeway. And he gets off Earth with his friend who turns out to secretly be an alien, and more shenanigans continue to occur. Like, they find the guy who made Earth. I think that's in this book. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. And they're making another Earth, and it turns out that Earth was actually a supercomputer. And they were trying to find the question to the answer of life, the universe, and everything. The answer is 42. There was a different supercomputer that told them that, but they don't know what the question is. So that's why they built Earth. And it's like, it's insane, and it's great. And what the hell? Sorry, I'm reading the stuff on the back and I'm like, who are you talking about this character? Is this probably just like a one-off joke? Anyway, it's delightful, and very weird, and I'm sure you already know all that. Everybody's heard of Hitchhiker's Guide. Okay, so here's the book where I'm like, wait, hang on, wasn't this from the 80s? And then I looked in the flap, And it's like copyright 1982, first edition 1982. So I don't know why my dumb ass put it on this list under the 1970s. And I'm sorry, we're gonna talk about it anyway. Nor Crystal Tears by Alan Dean Foster. This is such an 80s book, what the fuck? Okay, anyway, first of all, this cover. Can we talk about it in detail? I love it so much. But the basic premise of this is that it's like he wrote this series of books about how sometime in the future with like humans and these particular guys who are called the Thranks are like allies, and this is the prequel to that. And I've never read any of his other books, but this is a prequel of the first time that the Thranks interacted with some humans, and it's pretty great because it's from the perspective of the Thranks. And so from their perspective, humans are weird and gross and impossible, and I just found that very fun to read. I also really enjoyed this character of Ryu, who like is supposed to be a farmer of some sort, but he kind of keeps being like, but I want to do something else. And he gets really curious about a letter that he reads from a relative about a time when their spaceship ran into a different spaceship, and that spaceship had these very weird aliens on it. And he gets real curious about, as the back puts it, horrid, two-legged, soft-skinned, space-going beasts. I'm like, I love it. Love it. Love it. Anyway, it was a lot of fun. And not from the 1970s, fuck. So let's talk about the 80s for real, I guess. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. I think all these 80s books are from the 80s. I have a couple of them. But we begin with Neuromancer by William Gibson. Ugh, this was a more recent read, but fuck, I could have read this 3 months ago and I still wouldn't remember the plot because that's just how my brain works. Neuromancer, it's like the book that invented cyberpunk. Not really, maybe popularized cyberpunk. And a lot of it is like wandering virtually through somebody's mind. So like there's a lot of being like, now he plugged himself into the Matrix. So it's like hilarious. But what is the plot? I don't remember. It's about this hacker dude who can like plug into the Matrix. I don't know. And then they go to a space station. They're trying to do something. Let me see. Why would anybody watch this video? It's just me being like, you should read this book. I don't remember a single fucking thing about it. No, I do remember that it was good. Neuromancer. Also, this video is just me recommending stuff everyone's heard of. Okay. Oh, I forgot this thing has sequels. Or something. Plot. This guy lives in Japan. He was once a talented computer hacker and console cowboy, but he's caught stealing from his employer. Oh, right. So then they fuck up his nervous system so he can't, like, hack into the Matrix anymore. So then he gets hired by somebody who is like, first of all, I will pay to have you fixed so you can do this for me, and then you have to do this job for me. Okay, so this woman approaches him on behalf of shadowy US ex-military officer named Armitage, and he's like, I'll cure you if you hack something for me after I've cured you. But also I put poison sacs in your blood so you'll die if I don't fix that, and I won't fix it unless you do this for me. It's like fucked up. Anyway, they're supposed to steal a ROM module that contains the saved consciousness of this, oh god, of the legendary cyber cowboy McCoy Pauly. Fuck, this book was ridiculous. They find out who Armitage really was, and they're like, what the hell? This guy was weird. Oh yeah, Wintermute, the artificial intelligence. And then they go to this space station. And then there's a lot of Wintermute, like, sort of. Oh, right, and Wintermute wants to merge with his other half, Neuromancer. And now he's like, Wintermute has recruited Armitage, who's recruited these other guys. listen, do I need to explain all this? You get it. It's about hacking, it's ridiculous, and it's delightful. And like, there's just a lot, oh my god, there's so many characters. Hyperspace. And like, whenever they talk about the Matrix, I laughed a lot, which was probably not what you're supposed to do. But, I mean, I blame the movie The Matrix for that. It is really a very good book, though. It's very interesting. All right, let's move on. Next book, Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. Orson Scott Card as a human being, like, sucks ass. He really does. But this is a good book, and also I really needed to include it because I was kind of like, fuck, what am I gonna put for the 80s? Ender's Game. Guess if I'd remembered Nor Crystal Tears was a book from the 80s, I would have had less of a problem, right? But listen, I think it's fair for me to include this book with everybody has heard of, but whatever. As a favorite, because it was one of the first like proper adult sci-fi books I ever read. Like, I got into sci-fi through reading a bunch of Star Wars shit, but at some point acquired this random used copy of Ender's Game and read it and was just blown away by the twist ending, which, like, I'm not gonna tell you what it is, even though you probably already know. And, like, I didn't see it coming. Also, I was in high school, so give me a break. But, like, I just thought it was so good. And okay, so what's the plot? Essentially, in the future, humanity is having a big old war with a bunch of bug aliens, and for some ungodly reason, they keep recruiting children to like fly their little virtual spaceships in this war. And Ender is like fucking all of 6 years old. This book is insane, but he's super smart, and so they've recruited Ender along with a bunch of other very smart children for this program, and they're training to fly little spaceships and fight. And there's a whole lot of just like stuff about training in how to function in a weightless environment, which is really interesting. And there's also a lot of stuff about his siblings back on Earth, like blogging. I don't know what that was about. That was weird. But yeah, so that's essentially what it is. It's interesting. It's strange. Like, what am I gonna say? Everyone knows this book, but I was blown away by it when I first read it, so there you go. Okay, next one. Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency by Douglas Adams again. A Douglas Adams for the 80s. This is my favorite Douglas Adams book. It's so weird. Okay, so the story behind this book is that Douglas Adams worked on Doctor Who for a while back in like the 70s. And one of the seasons that he did, there was a story called Shada. And due to I think a writer's strike, I forget exactly, there was some sort of strike which delayed it and they were never able to finish filming it. So he took elements from the story of Shada and worked them into this book. And now, yeah. And so there is a character in this who is genuinely just a Time Lord, and no explanation is given. You just have to kind of go with it. He has a TARDIS, okay? And it's like the exact same setup as in Shada. It's just in this book, and also there's this computer programmer guy, and also there's a ghost, and also there's time travel, and Samuel Coleridge, and the beginning of time. So there's a couple of little bits in here that really reminded me of another Douglas Adams Doctor Who, City of Death, especially kind of like them going to the protoplasms of the beginnings of life on Earth. But honestly, it's just a lot of fun. I guess the main plot is that this character, come on, what the hell is the plot? I mean, it's about a detective named Dirk Gently, and he's kind of a scammer, honestly. Like, his detective agency just, like, he'll come up with ridiculous reasons why he needs a gazillion dollars to go to Mallorca, and he's, like, looking, or Majorca, and he's, like, looking for this woman's cat, and, like, you know, stupid shit like that, right? He's definitely just kind of scamming people, but then he starts looking into some real weird shit, keeps coming up, a ghost, a time traveler, and the devastating secret of humankind. Also there's some stuff with a horse. The point is the St. Sedge College is completely fictional. All right, and then a lot of it is set at Cambridge, a fake college in Cambridge. There really is a ghost in here, like, I'm not kidding. I need to read this again, my guys. It is very Douglas Adams and very good. Hyperion by Dan Simmons. Hyperion has a sequel that I've never read, so don't tell me about it. But basically, Hyperion is about a group of people traveling to meet a god. On the planet of Hyperion, there is a creature called, I think he's called like the Shrike, and it is essentially a murder robot that will just randomly show up and kill people. But they've built a religion around it because, like, what else are you gonna do? And the idea is that if you find the Shrike and pose a question to it, it might kind of grant your wish. It might answer your question, or maybe it'll just fucking murder you. But maybe that's your only hope, you know? And there are kind of pilgrimages where they go out and they go to a place to confront the Shrike. And this is about the last pilgrimage. I kind of don't remember if the world was ending or what, but I never remember anything useful, right? But a lot of the book itself is about these people traveling together, and as they travel across Hyperion, they're telling each other the story of why they're coming. And they're all very different stories with different kind of science fiction premises and, like, genres even. One of them's pretty cyberpunk, like one of them's basically about how, this really sad story about how his daughter is aging backwards. And he actually brought the daughter, who's a literal baby at this point. One thing I loved about this book, spoilers, whatever, was how it ends with you not knowing what's gonna happen. It ends with them getting to this particular place and they're heading out to find the Shrike, and then that's it. Like, you don't find out whether they find it, whether it kills them all, and I kind of loved that, but also this book has a sequel, so I feel like the sequel probably tells you. Also, for some reason, this planet is straight up obsessed with Byron. Yeah, it's Byron, I think. No, wait, Yeats? Keats. I don't know poets. I'm sorry, I don't fucking care about a lot of poetry. I think it's Keats, and it's embarrassing that I can't remember because truly the book will not shut up about him. And the planet is literally named Hyperion because he wrote a poem called Hyperion, I think. Hyperion. Oh god, I clicked on it's the cantos. Don't tell me what happens later. Huh. It was just really cool. So, like, what am I gonna say? Influences. Okay, it is Keats. The title of the first novel is taken from one of Keats's poems, the unfinished epic Hyperion. So I don't know what's up with Simmons and his obsession with Keats, but there you go. Oh yeah, there was like a whole city on the called Keats, I think, the like capital city of Hyperion. Anyway, there's a lot of interesting sci-fi stuff going on in that book though, and I just, you know, kind of thought it was a trip. Okay, Dragon's Egg by Robert L. Forward. I don't know why I included this exactly. I think I was just running out of books, but it was good. But I don't know, like, okay, Dragon's Egg is kind of a weird premise, but essentially, what if life developed on a neutron star? And it sounds insane because it is. But the idea is that life develops on this incredibly quickly rotating, very dense star. And so life is very different. It experiences time in incredibly different fashion. Time passes for them much, much quicker than it does for us. So from our perspective, maybe that the people will live like a couple of months, or maybe even less. I honestly don't remember. And it's an interesting book because you're seeing things from the perspective of a spacecraft that is going to go check out this neutron star that we found out is kind of like coming past our solar system, but also from the perspective of the beings who live on that star. And it hops through their history. So you see like the literal development of life and then civilization on their little world, until a point where they actually surpass humanity in scientific discovery. And that's honestly just what's interesting about it, is like learning this idea of like, what would life be like on this world that's so different from ours, and then how might we connect with it. So, okay, the 1990s. The 1990s, we're in the home stretch, and I actually modified this one because I wrote this list last year sometime, and since then have read a book I absolutely adored from the 90s, and I was like, oh, it's gotta go in here. So I think I know which one I'm going to replace. Okay, let's start with Nightfall by Isaac Asimov and Robert Silverberg. So this is a novelization, like a novel version of the short story Nightfall, which was written a couple of decades earlier. Oh my god, no. Nightfall was from 1941. Okay, but this book was published a lot later because Isaac Asimov just truly lived a really long time. Actually, if this was published in the 90s, my man died in like 92. So, yeah, this was, 1990. Okay, I don't really know that much of anything about Robert Silverberg, I'm afraid. Okay, so the basic premise of this story is there is a world where there is never night. There are 7, I believe, stars, easily visible, close enough to be considered suns, that illuminate the sky. There's always at least one of them up. And so the people who live on this planet have never experienced night. Except according to local astronomers, they're going to very soon. There is going to be a very rare confluence where for about 4 hours, there will be night. And everybody is like, oh shit, what do we do? So the short story that's essentially the premise of the short story, where some archaeologists also are discovering some strange things about patterns of rise and fall of civilization in the history of their planet. And the book continues after the point where nightfall occurs, right? So like the short story ends when night has fallen, and there's a reaction to that, and that's the story. The book continues past that, although I got to admit, I do not really remember what happens in that point, because again, it's been years since I've read this book, and apparently the only thing I'm capable of remembering is emotions and premise. Actual plot, I'm like, who is she? I don't know. But I remember loving this, so there you go. Just thought the idea was really, really cool. So yeah, and I was right, it is cool. Okay, I want to talk about City of Bones by Martha Wells. So this is an interesting book because, I don't know, I read it for that science fiction book club again, and so this was truly years ago, and I truly don't remember the plot, beyond saying that it's set in the very far future. It is on Earth, but it's an Earth that is wildly changed by climate change, I think was the factor. And therefore, like, there's just a lot less water. It's just a very unpleasant place to live. But there's this city where most of the characters in the book live. And, I'm gonna look it up. And at some point also, there evolved a a type of human capable of dealing with the more intense temperatures, less water, etc. But there's not very many of them left, but one of the main characters is a member of that race, and he is actually like lives in the city away from his people because I think the premise of that was just he didn't want to have children and they were going to make him, so he's like, all right, I'm leaving. City of Bones. No, not the modern instruments. So come on. I'm just seeing if it'll quickly take me there. Yeah, I want the novel by Martha Wells. I don't think there's I guess I don't have a page. They have a page on Martha Wells. Look at her. Published works. I mean, yeah, I'm sorry, there's like no info really on it on Wikipedia, but I liked it a lot. It's on my short list of things I really want to reread. Like there was a girl who was training in some sort of magic stuff. There was definitely like secrets being uncovered. There was a bunch of traveling outside of the city to this place where they find like this well, and there's some weird shit going on. I don't know. I really enjoyed it though. Okay, Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. Everybody's heard of it. Y'all know Jurassic Park. They bring dinosaurs back to life on an island, and it proves to be a bad idea. It's a great book though. For all that that mathematician not shutting the fuck up about chaos theory is even more irritating in the book, but also he dies, so that's nice. Honestly, no, it's just like a really solid book. Like Michael Crichton's whole thing in his sci-fi books is he gets like really deep into being like, this is how this could happen. And that's fun. So like he really gets into some stuff in this book. I guess I just didn't have a ton of books to talk about with the 90s. And so that's why Jurassic Park kind of made it on here. But it is a really good book. Like I just feel like I'm not teaching you anything interesting by saying that, but there you go. All right, now I'm going to talk about The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell, which I read a couple of months ago for the first time, so this is the replacement. This is getting slotted in there. I fucking loved The Sparrow. Like, a truly fantastic book. The premise is that SETI discovers, and they finally discover alien life. They discover proof of intelligence out there. They hear some music from the stars. And like, because of the people who first find out about this and figure it out from SETI and connected to SETI, the Jesuits decide to send a mission of their own to go to this world. And the way that the story is told is like part of it, you're flipping back and forth between past and present. So in the past, they are finding the signal from SETI, they're preparing this particular mission. In the present, the only survivor of the mission has been returned to Earth, and he is slowly recovering from his ordeal, and his story is kind of being drawn out of him by the people looking after him. So it's, oh my god, it's such a good book. Like, there's so much interesting stuff about religion, the personal like philosophy of the various different characters who go on this trip. And the idea of this priest who is the main character and the sole survivor, who he goes over a very interesting, like, emotional but like religious journey through the book, from believing deeply in the church more than God to kind of hitting am I actually destined for this? Is this God speaking to me? There's too many coincidences, you know? To thinking maybe God has a destiny for him, maybe God wants all of this to happen, and maybe God loves him. Like, the idea that he kind of lights on this, like, what if God truly does exist and he loves me? And then it becomes completely devastating when everything turns very sour. Especially at the end when it's just like, because he keeps hoping like these terrible things are happening, but maybe there's a reason for it. And then comes up against it and it's like, or maybe there isn't at all, actually. And it's, oh my God, it's a lot. Also, like, trigger warning for a couple of things. I feel like I should bring this up. Like, I know, just because it was really a lot in this book. So trigger warning for rape and for cannibalism. It's not technically really cannibalism, but like it's close enough. That's all I'm gonna say. But I just felt like I should mention it. But God, I loved that book. I loved it so much. And it was just beautifully written. I loved all the characters. It was just really devastating to go through the book and realize, oh shit, he's the sole survivor. Oh shit, are these people all going with him? That means they are all gonna die. And so that was just like, I hated that revelation. Let me tell you. I was very sad, and I cried a lot while I was reading that book. Highly recommend it. Beautifully written. And now we must come to the end. I have one more book to talk about, and it's 4 Ways to Forgiveness, which is a collection of short stories and novellas by Ursula K. Le Guin, which I barely remember, but I put it on here because I was like, fuck, I'm running out of 90s books. Okay, so, clearly. So it's part of her Hainish cycle. All of these stories are set on the couple of different planets, a couple of planets though, so there's like connections between them. Contents. Let's see, we've got I can't explain it. Listen, the way Ursula K. Le Guin writes is just so good. It's 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 so good. Some of the stories have overlapping characters. And, oh, the 2 planets are in the same solar system. Okay. Themes. They revolve around concepts of freedom and slavery. And basically, for thousands of years, there was a system of slavery, but in recent years, following colonization of the second planet, things have begun to change. Yeah, so it's just, and gender relations, let's see, in its initial years of settlement, only male slaves were transported to that planet, which has led to a hyper-masculine culture and formalized homosexual relationships among them. Wow, I need to read this again too. Anyway, whatever. It's a fantastically good book. Like everything Ursula K. Le Guin ever wrote that had anything to do with space. And that's my last recommendation, I guess. I don't know. Is this a recommendation video? It's just me talking about my favorites, but in a really narrow way. I don't know. So it's Jesus. At some point, I'll make the sequel video where I talk about my favorite books from the 21st century. And really get into that, because there's a lot of them. But I guess I wanted to talk about classic sci-fi more today. 90s don't really count as classic sci-fi, I guess. But like, I feel like a lot of people on YouTube are kind of babies, so maybe it does to them, I don't know. But, I mean, you know, the 90s do feel quite different from the present, of course, because it was 30 years ago. And books are kind of different in a lot of ways. And I certainly didn't read any of those books when it was the 90s. Because I was a child. Okay, I think we're done. I think I need to shut up. But thank you for enduring this with me. And I hope that maybe I had mentioned at least one book that you might find interesting or that you've never read. And I hope I said at least enough things. I skipped a book. What the fuck? Okay, okay, we have to talk about one more book. I've got it written on here. My brain fucking fell out of my skull, I guess. Okay, A Scanner Darkly by Philip K. Dick is from the 1970s. And I'm a dumb motherfucker who I just skipped straight over it while I was reading the list. Amazing. Okay, we're gonna end with A Scanner Darkly. Another book club book, and my favorite Philip K. Dick book, definitely. It's about a man who is investigating some drug that's on the market, like some very weird drug, because it's Philip K. Dick, so of course there's drugs, right? He is undercover investigating this drug, but the thing is that while he's undercover being part of this group that's selling the drug, etc., he is also taking it, and it's fucking up his memory. So he actually starts to forget who he is he will be watching like footage of himself earlier the day or earlier in the week as the undercover person, and now he's like the cop person watching the footage. He will forget that that's him. It's very strange. And yeah, I mean, basically it's about this investigation. So, also fantastic movie, honestly. Like, it's got Robert Downey Jr., Keanu Reeves, Winona Ryder, some other people whose names I don't remember right now. I mean, it was funny because I knew this, so when I was reading the book, I was like, oh, I can tell exactly which character Robert Downey Jr. is gonna play. And I was right. He had a vibe. But the movie is in rotoscope, which I think adds just another really great layer of like unreality to the whole thing. So that's fun. It's a very good book. I think he does an excellent job with it, and it's weird. You should read it. A Scanner Darkly. I love that title. So there you go. There you go. That's my favorites from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And gotta put these books away. And maybe read something else.